Welcome to the Contracting Officer Podcast. It's not just for contracting officers. If you're anywhere in the government acquisition world, this podcast is for you. Today, Kevin welcomes special guest Brian Lindholm to talk about Black Hat Reviews. This episode is brought to you by Skyway Acquisition. Check us out at skywayacq.com. All right, let's get started.
This week, we're talking about the Black Hat Review. You can add that to the long list of things that I had no idea they existed when I was a contracting officer. It turns out that Black Hat Reviews were a part of or sometimes a huge part of the process that was going on while I was building an acquisition strategy and then releasing an RFP. And so I thought it was worth covering in a podcast, but as you can imagine, it's not something I should cover on my own. So I wanted to bring in somebody who knows it well. So introducing Brian Lindholm from Fed Savvy Strategies. So welcome, Brian, to the podcast.
Great. Hey, thanks, Kevin. I'm really happy to be here.
So I want to start off with, before we dig into the Black Hat Review concept, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you ended up this being your thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess first and foremost, I'm a nerd. So, and nerds get attracted to these kind of obtuse topics very, very readily. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I was a naval officer, eventually got into government contracting on the industry side. But really, I got on this journey, I think started around 2007. I developed from scratch the competitive intel, market intel function for a company that formerly known as URS Corporation's Federal Service Business, now Amentum. So built it from scratch and kind of just learned on my own, really. So it was a tricky journey, but a fun journey that I learned through digging into competitors that helped us do better solutions and helped us to actually improve our win rates and be better competitors, frankly.
What was the inflection point when you realized this stuff worked?
You know, I realized it worked when we would go after some bids that we were completely new to in an area. I recall it was an Army Training Services contract where we had no incumbency at all, nothing. We had some of the right skills to win that contract, but we were going up against some pretty formidable incumbents, but we actually won. And the revelation we went through to understand what they could do and then to shape our solution to be better than their solution, or at least comparable to win a spot on the contract, when we had nothing with the client, nothing at all. The homework part really helped us get into a new market, which is great. So I think that was sort of the moment of clarity, but wow, this actually works. Is that the capture managers, I saw their eyes go wide. And when they began to see the threats more clearly, I could see the dual capture manager team, that they were actively reshaping their solution to be not just more competitive, but also a better fit for the requirements to stand out. And that, I think, was kind of the aha moment for me. That was many years ago.
And that's a great example of the stuff that I didn't realize was happening when I was a contracting officer. By the time the RFP comes out, we talk about that a lot. By the time the RFP drops, it's too late. Let's kind of baseline what we're talking about here. So give us a basic understanding of what is a Black Hat Review specifically.
A Black Hat Review, in the pure sense of the word, is an attempt to apply competitive intelligence to a capture to understand what a competitor or a group of competitors can do. There's a lot of wild variations how people actually do these. Some use a sort of weird Socratic method to walk around a room and ask questions and try to look smarter than they probably actually are. I prefer to approach it with more of a simulation. Here's a simulation based on a situation, aka a bid that they're going to go after. And the variables in there are the competitors. What could they do based on the analysis we do, what their capabilities are, and what their tendencies tend to be in terms of how they behave in that situation, and then enable us to understand what they can do, therefore allowing us to understand what we're up against to shape our solution better. So it really is more an actual application of competitive intelligence to make a decision and a series of decisions so you can be at a better chance to win. So it's important.
Okay, so I like that phrasing, application of competitive intelligence. So we collect this is a great example of collecting a lot of data. You go into the FAR, you collect a lot of data. You got to be able to apply it. Like you collect a lot of information on what opportunities you could go after. You have to target and apply them. In this case, once you pick that opportunity, you start collecting information, but how do you actually apply it in order to get the result you want, which is to win the contract?
Right.
So what exactly do they tell us? What does a Black Hat Review tell the people that use them?
When you look at what a black hat's telling you, first and foremost, it helps you understand and identify and evaluate where a competitor is going to be strong and where they might have some gaps, weaknesses that potentially you can highlight by emphasizing what you do in your solution. Because I think, this is my opinion, for what it's worth, because if you run it like a simulation, it really helps you dig deep into what they are capable of doing. And I always operate with when they are at their best. When they are at their best, what can they do? Because if they're not, Darwin steps in and takes them out through natural selection. I don't worry about them anymore. So it helps me understand their best win strategies. And then once I understand what they can do, then I can shape my solution to go ahead and be a way of neutralizing or exploiting what they're going to do to make my solution be more differentiated and ideally more aligned with the value of what that government customer is trying to figure out and what they're trying to achieve. So it's the application of it, of intelligence to action to help you win.
It's interesting, and I would think this isn't really relevant to the government side, but the beauty of this is that competition is happening all the time. And it's good that the entire acquisition process, it leans toward competition. So the expectation is there is competition. If there's going to be competition, I mean, this is a great example of getting away from we're just going to beat them on price to what things can our competitors do at their best, and how do we position ourselves so that we can present a better solution that the customer cares about, not just price. This isn't a battle over price. There's not much you mentioned at all that's about price.
There's a very big feed in that we all have to understand where this goes. Where this can help you alter your solution, to tailor your solution, both to hopefully make sure you can better address what the government's actually looking for, but also then to stand out from your competition. But the wrinkle here is this does have an impact on pricing, because the levers you're pulling in your solution have a material impact on that. So if you know that company X is going to do Y to get their price down, then how do I either emulate that or how do I beat that? So whenever we do a black hat review, any really truly good competitive intel, in the end, it has to feed in price to win. If you're not feeding into price to win, then price to win's operating in a vacuum and not having information to work with, which would be a shame. So there is an impact. I think it also, but with the part that's a benefit here, is that it doesn't make you obsess over price.
It's interesting. You think of the triangle. You have the technical on one side, you've got the experience, past performance on the other side, and you got the price. And the shape of that triangle is going to change. And to your point, if you change your technical approach, the price is going to change. You move those points, and the triangle changes shape because you're impacting the other sides of it. So everything you do from like you said, making your strategy result in lowering your price. That's part of the overall approach. And this is the kind of stuff that drives people to make those decisions that I had no clue was happening when I was putting out RFIs and mapping out a source selection plan. So let me jump in on into the FAR a little bit here, because you got to cover some FAR language, right? So why does competitive intelligence matter and black hat review specifically? The FAR beats the drum on competition. And we've talked about this in a lot of our episodes, is the competition is the expectation unless otherwise proven, right? So there's a whole section about competition, FAR Part 6. We've done episodes on that. Bottom line is contractors should expect to compete, and agencies should expect that companies are going to compete for the work. Most agencies, and even a lot of contracting offices, have what's called a competition advocate. And their job description, in fact, it's laid out in the FAR, is specifically to generate competition. And because I got to have my FAR reference in here, 6.502 says duties and responsibilities of that person. And it includes things like promoting the acquisition of commercial items, promoting full and open competition, challenging the requirements that are not stated in terms that specify what the result the government is looking for, and then challenging barriers to acquisition of through full and open competition. This is right out of the FAR. They're finding ways to generate competition. My point of all this is government acquisition process says you got to compete, or more often than not, you're going to compete. If that's true, then competitive intelligence matters. Because if you're going to be competing, you should be thinking about this. So from your perspective, why do they matter so much? Give me your viewpoint on what result they really drive.
I think they matter. There's a variety of reasons of why they matter. I mean, this is nothing revolutionary. Black hat reviews are something that, if you go by the Shipley Bible about the 1,000-step process to do capture and business development, that is part of this. It's one step in there. But the reason they matter is it helps you understand what you're up against. If you do it well, it helps you really understand the threats that you as a company face to win a contract. It is a way also to help kind of keep you in check. Because people, if you end up in your own little echo chamber, and you go, well, here's how wonderful we are. I hate to break it to you, you're not a special little snowflake. There's a lot of really talented group of people out there that can beat you. So if you're not aware of what they can do to beat you, you're going to lose. You're going to lose a lot. So it helps keep things honest. It really does. I've had to learn this the hard way, how to do it well. It's tricky. It really is tricky. There's a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, analysis, and execution that goes into it. But if you do it well, if you do it well, you can see the eyes light up in the capture team, the solutions architects. They're like, oh my God, I didn't see that threat. Oh, I didn't see that coming. So it helps them be able to really shape their solution again to be more effective and more competitive. That's the long and short of why it matters.
What happens if you don't put in the right ingredients?
There's also usually what I'll call master of the obvious sort of statements, right? MOTO. So congratulations, you get the MOTO award of the day. If you just sort of do it like a drive-by or a check in the box, oh, let's just get it out of the way, get it done, we do a black hat, we said we did it, great. You do a drive-by where it's sort of just casual coffee talk about a competitor. You're not learning anything besides regurgitating what you already know. That's a waste of time and money and effort. Don't do it. Commit or don't bother. Really just skip this step entirely. There's a lot of prep that goes into these things to make it work. So you do the homework. It actually helps you understand. It makes you learn about the competitor over time. To walk into a room and think you're going to have a revelation after an hour of work, you're high. It's not going to happen. It takes time to really let it percolate in your mind, let the ideas sink in, to be creative and play with different ideas to actually figure it out.
Taking the data and then thinking about what it's actually going to look like after you've dug below the surface of what's on your competitor's website. How are they going to apply the advantage they have? That's the simulation you're talking about.
It really is. And I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin, because that's actually the reason I focus that way is I take a group of people and I immerse them into a competitor. If you just do like, oh, let's talk about company A for 30 minutes. Okay, we got it. Next. You don't learn anything. You only learn surface level stuff.
Right.
When you take them in a simulation, you say, today, you are Acme Corporation selling anvils. Okay. Once they immerse themselves in that and they really begin to think in that role, then they have those revelations about what they're up against. Because they can just focus on one competitor and dig deep into them.
Yeah, it's the application. Having information is one thing, but applying it is the difference.
Right.
So we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't talk through the time zones. And this is an interesting one because this is all in the acquisition time zones. If you're not familiar with the acquisition time zones, we cover those in episode number 3. And most recently, we cover all of the time zones in episode 317. But we'll start with the requirement zone. Okay, so the government's starting to write their requirement. Industry is starting to be aware that there's a requirement coming. Could be a recompete, could be a new requirement. What's going on from a black hat review perspective and a competitive intelligence perspective during the requirement zone?
Yeah. So if you go to the requirement zone when things are just beginning to come together, it's really tricky to do a black hat at that point. Because at that point, the requirements are probably not always solidified. So what are you comparing a competitor against? So it's hard if I don't know what the baseline is of what the government's expecting to happen, then I'm operating in a very vague space. So it's kind of hard to do that up front.
So it sounds like, once again, the market research zone is the busiest zone because there's all kinds of stuff going on in there. And this sounds like that what you just described, not having a clear understanding of the requirement means that you're doing a lot of guessing. So the market research zone is a better place for it, it sounds like?
It really is. It really is. At that point, because the opportunity is actually more mature. You can define what you're up against. You can define what the government's trying to figure out. But people get very worked up about, I got to understand the company that we're up against. Well, understand them against what? You're all trying to satisfy the same customer. You're all trying to figure out how to help their mission. So if you don't know what that mission is, you can't define what they're looking for, then you're just doing guesswork. So there's no point. It's sort of the Goldilocks zone. That's the way I look at this. So too early, too cold. Right in the middle, perfect. If you wait until the RFP is already out, 1, you're dead. And 2, it's too hot. It's too live. You can't do anything with it. Even if you learn something out of the black hat, you should be working on the RFP response. Not worry about the black hat. It's too little too late.
yet another thing that is happening in the market research zone, that from the government side, the more communication that I can send out to the folks who are considering competing, the more information I can send out about people who are considering competing, the better position they're going to be. And I like the way you said that, so they can position themselves against what? If you don't know what you're competing for, you don't know if you're going to win it. And so that's a very simple concept, but it has a lot of meat in it. Okay, so I'm going to jump on why the government cares about this. So like I mentioned, the government customer may not even be aware of how this impacts them. I really didn't, and I had no idea. So kind of walk me through what the government folks need to know about these.
Information is key. If I, industry, know what my government customer is trying to solve, in that case, then I can make sure I can begin to shape my solution to meet that more effectively upfront. From a Black Hat perspective, it allows me to do my homework earlier on in the capture. The better prepared I am, the better my solution is going to be, but also I may actually make some material decisions on teaming solutions or teaming arrangements based on that. If I don't know what I'm operating against, I am, to your own point, I'm guessing. I'm swagging like crazy to figure out what the heck's going on here. So that information fuels everything. So this is a case where sharing is caring, right? Sharing is caring, and the more transparent the government customer is with the industry, they better understand what they're up against, and they better understand how to address it, which also informs this, because remember, we're doing this based on what the government wants, not what we want to see. That's what I call the land of wishful thinking. And that often creeps into these events where, yep, that's not relevant to Section M, nobody cares. Not relevant to the requirements, it's what you want to see, nobody cares. Not scoreable, does not matter. Is it not even addressing the requirements? So it is important to understand this does have material impacts on what bid decisions are, or even no bids.
When I share information as a contracting officer, the rock in a pond effect of that information, particularly if we're changing the strategy, but even small things like changing a timeline or driving a decision that I otherwise wouldn't have been aware of, is a big part of getting a better solution as from the government. Because you're right, the whole strategy of this is to solve the problem the government has, not to have incumbentitis and say, hey, we did this great last time. Well, if the new requirement, the modified requirement, and the new solicitation may not look a lot like last time. Sometimes they do. Full disclosure, I had lots of RFPs that looked like the last one that we did, but oftentimes they can change. Or one small piece of it changes in a way that, like you said, changes the, what did you call it, the fabric of the competitive landscape. Right. So how does this impact teaming? I would think this would drive teaming, but how the government behaves as far as sharing information.
Yeah, well, from a teaming perspective, one thing what you do in this process is when you're doing real good competitive intel and Black Hat reviews, you also begin to understand where you come short. So I'm going to call those out. If I'm driving a Black Hat, I'm looking to see where am I exposed? Where is someone going to undermine my chance to bid? So as we come out of this, we may go, golly, you know what? If we team with Acme Corporation here, we go from good to amazing, because we see now more clearly what they can do. Therefore, downstream, the government benefits because they get better teams with better solutions who can better address their challenges. Because everyone's playing this I have a secret game. Nobody really wins, because in the end, we're all trying to serve the government customer, right? That's the end game, is to serve them and serve them well. But if competitors know what the real requirements are, and they begin to understand what their peers can do, because none of these companies, especially for big deals, can cover it all. If they do, they think they can, they're out of their minds. They can't do it. So it helps them understand where their own gaps are so they can present a better solution. I've seen many capture get turned around because they have a moment of revelation. Wow, we team with these guys. We go from okay to amazing. We do. And guess what? They have a better chance to win.
It's an interesting point that a ancillary benefit or tertiary benefit of the Black Hat review is identifying the teaming partners that would make the best match for you. And if you're doing it right, you're going to see it, because it's about application. You're applying what can they do better than us? What can we do better than them? You put those two together and you've got a very different conversation. But to your point, you can't make that decision. Well, you can, but it won't work during the RFP zone. You can't wait till after the RFP and says, oh, I need to go find a partner.
Too late. Game over.
Okay, so why does industry care? Right. Last time I saw a stat about competition, government-wide, the competition outnumbered non-competitive awards by like 2-1. It was like 70%. So except for those rare examples of companies that have a lot of sole source stuff, which, there are some, most of the time, nearly everybody has to compete. So it's kind of the standard.
Yeah, it is more competitive now. I think also there's a couple points there in terms of why does industry care about this. Is we've talked, I think, at great length about how it helps them understand the competition with a deeper level of understanding, which, that's a very true thing. There's other aspects about this of why they care. One is especially if you're the incumbent. Right, we kind of touched on that a little bit before. If you're the incumbent, you think you're the smartest guy in the room. Newsflash for you, you are beatable. And I think we all know incumbent win rates aren't what they used to be. It used to be you're an incumbent, you locked it up. Unless you found some new and exciting way to screw things up, you're going to win again and again and again. Not anymore. We see incumbents get upset all the time. So it helps to, I think, make the incumbent team think, okay, everyone's out to get me, because they are. So how do I need to make some incremental adjustments of how I pursue this next recompete? That's a very big deal. I've seen many incumbent get absolutely smashed to bits, even if they were doing a good job, because they walked in thinking copy paste, solution again, win again, rinse, repeat. And the part about this, why industry cares, is it helps you not obsess over price. I will tell you the number of times I'm in a black hat. Oh, well, they're going to bid low. What does that mean? Does that mean they're going to look at the government estimate, get a shovel, dig 500 feet below that, and then bid at that rate? What does that mean? But the teams, it's so easy to fall into that, where I'm just going to bid low. Okay, is there something you can do to maybe add value besides trying to shave dollars where you end up kind of screwed up because you're bidding too low as it is? There's other ways of winning to add value. I've been in bids where I recall one was a $700 million win against two incumbents where my client, who was the challenger, crushed them. They priced significantly higher, but their technical was so far superior, they obliterated the competitors. And the incumbents were, I'm sure, scratching their head, how on earth would we get trashed that bad? Because guess what? They knew you well, and they knew how to beat you, and they didn't have to compete on price.
So even going in at a higher price, because you lined up all the things that made your competitive solution better, you went with even with a higher price. But it's, again, price is never out of the conversation. It has to have the value that matches the price.
But also this feeds into price to win. People obsess over the pricing part. You've got to get the pricing right. You can have a magnificent solution, but if you're so far beyond the competition that the government can't justify that by, it's a shame. When you have that magnificent solution, you can't win. The way this has to work is this has to feed pricing. It has to be the input to help the people actually tasked with the pricing to understand, here are the levers that are being pulled. Can I pull some of these levers too to get a little bit more creative? I don't want it to dictate it. I don't want the tail to wag the dog here. But the reality is you have to take those inputs. And if you do this well, then it's not just, okay, let's cut everyone's salary by 20% and call it a day. That's going to go great.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to lose a lot of incumbents. Okay. So one of the things I'm really curious about is, so what size company does this make sense for?
Yeah, it is. So doing this kind of exercise, doing it well, is not a trivial matter. So I'm not going to lie there. It requires some effort, requires some planning, requires some investment of time and effort to get it done. I don't know there's a hard and fast company size. I think that ideally it'd be more of a mid-tier company who's mature with several hundred employees, because they'll be going after bids of the size and magnitude where this has a real return on investment. If you're bidding on a job with 5 people, probably a little bit overkill here if you use something like this to go after it. But if something that's going to be transformational for the company as a whole, or a major recompete, then it's a better investment of time and effort, because there is more return on investment to happen.
Well, that's an interesting point, that it's as much about the impact, the return on investment of your time and effort, as it is the size. And so I would think that the 5 employee opportunity, yeah, you don't need to dig in this deep, but at the same time, you have to have some understanding of the difference between, hey, these companies are bidding, let's beat them on price, versus what do you have that they don't have? We have an episode called the Lockout. It was a couple hundred episodes ago. It was around that topic, which I hadn't thought through, but that actually fits really well here in the conversation. Is if you understand what your lockout is, or you understand what their lockout is, they've got some technology, they've got some opportunity, they've got some person, and whatever the situation is, you're doing some of this drill. So I would think that even on the smaller opportunities, this should be part of the conversation. But the simulations, the amount of times you go through it, the amount of competitors you consider, the amount of time you spend researching the data on those companies to see which contracts they're actually winning and contract types and all. Yeah, then you get into the larger ones. So it's almost like when you said mid-tier, it's like a large small business, or and then basically a large small business and up. There's a lot of stuff we do on our podcast that people think, oh, that only applies to the giant ones. It's like, no, the concept, the mindset of this should apply on pretty much everything. But the amount of effort you put in has to be commensurate with the ROI you're going to get out of it. And for a small company going after $1 million opportunity, if you spend a half a day on this and your competitors spend a goose egg on it, it's worth it for you. But to your point, if you just put window dressing and just Google their sites and go, yeah, these 3 companies are worse than us based on your definition of worse, then yeah, you're wasting your time. So what's a good takeaway from this? Like it seems like if they slap it together, they're going to get garbage in, garbage out. So what do you think is the best way for them to for any company who sees the ROI in this? What's the best thing for them to do?
If you do this too late, so for example, RFPs in a week or two, and you're thinking, maybe we should do this. Try again. Too late, my friend. If by the time you actually do it well and get hey, we did a great Black Hat, all the proposal responses due in a day. That's not good timing. You got to make sure you get it done early. This goes back to maybe a little bit more fundamentals of what I'll call competitive intel tradecraft, right? So this is not going to the obligatory database subscription, banging on keyboards, doing keywords. You need to apply tradecraft, right? We actually model things based on the intelligence community, how they do tradecraft. Basic intel process, model collection, analysis, production. Go through that, apply it. And certainly other parts that I think people do and do badly is they don't do homework before the actual Black Hat itself. They go in and they wing it. Oh, we're a bunch of smart people. Well, no, you don't. I guarantee you don't. Spend some time doing some homework, right? Get your ideas together, understand the competitor, and write down ideas of what you think they're going to do to bring to the team, as opposed to walking in there blank slate. You got to get commitment. People are going to be walking in there without doing prep or really even thinking of taking it seriously. I don't want them in the room. I seriously don't. If they're just sucking the air out of the room, trying to wing it, that's not appropriate. And read up on the topic, how to do it. Now, for example, our blog has tons of tips how to actually do it well, how to scale it, how to apply it, how to handle different situations. Take the information and put it out there for a reason, not because of we just enjoy writing blogs, but I want to help people win. Last but not least, minds are like parachutes. They only work when they're open. In doing this, you're going to be confronted with information that you didn't know, or maybe runs contrary to what you think you know. I actually coach people before we do a Black Hat. Listen, you're going to be hit with information you've never heard before. Be open about it. Think about it. Process it. Don't just deny it because it doesn't resonate with what you think the world looks like. If we're acting like that, we still think the world is flat. Give me a break. You've got to be open to go ahead and think about this. Think about red pill, blue pill, Neo. What's it going to be? Stay in the matrix or go in the real world? The real world is where you're going to actually be able to win. It's important to make sure you keep an open mind to actually do something with the information you got out of it.
I really appreciate you going through this and helping people really understand at least the basic level what the Black Hat Review is and how to use it. So assuming they need more help, how do people connect with you and get help with competitive intel as well as how to do a better Black Hat Review?
Our website's www.fedsavvystrategies.com. Go on there, contact us by all means. You can hit me up on LinkedIn if you want to. I'm one of the LinkedIn nerds out there. So Brian Lindholm on LinkedIn, always happy to connect with someone. One thing also for the tradecraft part, we're actually going to put an online course very soon on actually doing competitive intelligence in the tradecraft approach, as opposed to banging on database keyboards. So we'll put the resources out to you to help you win.
I love the intelligence community mindset is again, something I had no context of as a contracting officer, and I've seen it play out on now that we're seeing the market from both sides. It's fascinating stuff. So once again, thank you, Brian. And by the way, just to make it easy, so his last name is Lindholm. Thanks for taking the time, Brian, and I will see you around.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for joining us today on the Contracting Officer Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Skyway Acquisition. Skyway's team of former contracting officers is here to help you understand what your government contracts counterparts are thinking about through custom consulting and training. Check us out at skywayacq.com or give us a call at 877-884-5280. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.